Chapter 13, Acceptance. Man's perceptions are not bounded by organs of perception. He perceives more than sense, though ever so acute, can discover. However much you seem to be living in a material world, you are actually living in a world of imagination. The outer physical events of life are the fruit of forgotten blossom times, results of previous and usually forgotten states of consciousness. They are the end running true to oft-times forgotten imaginative origins. Whenever you became completely absorbed in an emotional state, you are at that moment assuming the feeling of the state fulfilled. And if persisted in, whatsoever you are intensely emotional about, you will experience in your world. These periods of absorption, of concentrated attention, are the beginnings of the things that you harvest. It is in such moments that you are exercising your creative power, the only creative power that there is. At the end of these periods, or moments of absorption, you speed from these imaginative states, where you have not been physically, to where you were physically an instant ago. In these periods, the imagined state is so real that when you return to the objective world and find that it is not the same as the imagined state, it is an actual shock. You've seen something in imagination with such vividness that you now wonder whether the evidence of your senses can now be believed, and like Keats, you ask, was it a vision or a waking dream? Fled is that music. Do I wake or do I sleep? This shock reverses your time sense. By this, it's meant that instead of your experience resulting from your past, it now becomes the result of being in imagination where you have not yet been physically. In effect, this moves you across a bridge of incident to the physical realization of your imagined state. The man who at will can assume whatever state he pleases has found the keys to the kingdom of heaven. The keys are desire, imagination, and a steadily focused attention on the feeling of the wish fulfilled. To such a man, any undesirable objective fact is no longer a reality, and the ardent wish no longer a dream. Prove me now herewith, saith the Lord of hosts, if I will not open you up the windows of heaven and pour you out a blessing, that there shall not be enough room to receive it. Malachi chapter 3 and verse 10. The windows of heaven may not be opened, and the treasures seized by a strong will, but they open of themselves and present their treasures as a free gift. A gift that comes when absorption reaches such a degree that it results in a feeling of complete acceptance. The passage from your present state to the feeling of your wish fulfilled is not across a gap. There is continuity between the so-called real and unreal. To cross from one state to the other, you simply extend your feelers, trust your touch, and enter fully into the spirit of what you are doing. Not by might, nor by power, but by my spirit, saith the Lord of hosts. Assume the spirit, the feeling of the wish fulfilled, and you will have opened the windows to receive the blessing. To assume a state is to get into the spirit of it. Your triumphs will be a surprise only to those who did not know your hidden passage from the state of longing to the assumption of the wish fulfilled. The Lord of hosts will not respond to your wish until you have assumed the feeling of already being what you want to be, for acceptance is the channel of his action. Acceptance is the Lord of hosts in action. What I love about this chapter is how Neville points to the fact that we are actually living in a world of imagination, and the outer physical events of our lives are actually the fruits of forgotten blossom times, or the results of previous and usually forgotten states of consciousness. I find that with an undisciplined mind, it is impossible to determine which experiences come from which states. Unless we kind of have this basic level of emotional intelligence that allows us to detect the substance of a circumstance, the basic emotional theme, because at that point we can make correlation to a state, right? If we can determine what the basic kind of underlying emotional theme of a circumstance is, we can ultimately understand what created that circumstance, simply because we understand that states of consciousness reproduce themselves in our lives. So if you're having trouble figuring out the correlations between state and experience, take a look. Take a look at the underlying emotional themes that are going on in your experiences. What are the narratives that those things are telling? Because you'll find that the narrative that you are telling as a result of the experience is ultimately perpetuating more of the experience itself. And this is the really, really, really cool thing here, is that it's almost like a feedback loop that if we take some time to slow down and study, we can understand how imaginative states become those forgotten blossom times. And he mentions specifically what it means to assume the feeling of the state fulfilled. And this is becoming completely absorbed in an emotional state, right? Completely absorbed. We hear in other chapters, he talks about pushing all other ideas out of consciousness. You know you have entered into a state when a single idea has crowded all other ideas out of your mind, and you are totally consumed in the vivid sensory reality of the state. And if persisted in whatever this intensely emotional period of absorption consists of, will ultimately turn into the experiences you have in your life. And so it is. And so it does. Whatever we are intensely emotional about becomes the experiences of our lives. And this is why telling stories of how much we're victims and how much we can't do this and how much, we are incapable, all that does is produce more of itself. We can't tell stories that are limiting and not expect to experience the fruit of those stories in our lives. And once we begin to understand this, we find that our lives grow and evolve in the same way a tree evolves. You wouldn't expect to get an orange from an apple seed, right? You would not expect an orange to grow on a tree that comes from an apple seed. And in the same way, you're not going to get abundance when you've planted a tree of poverty and sorrow, when you've lived in states of I am not enough and unworthiness and brokenness and chaos and nothing's working for me and all of these different things. You're planting seeds, and those seeds produce trees. And don't be mistaken, everything that we sow, we do reap. And if you plant a seed of poverty, you will experience the fruit of that seed. And this is the way it is. And if you'd like to figure out if your emotional absorption is intense enough, examine your reaction when you come back to the physical world. That's something that I like to do, is when I'm constantly imagining throughout the day, and when I get into those periods of absorption to where I come back to wherever I am, whether it's sitting in my car or in my chair upstairs, whatever it is, it is almost shocking. When it's gotten to that point, you can pretty much be guaranteed that the manifestation is sure, and you'll know this by seeing every time after that intense emotional absorption, after that point in time, it becomes easier to tap into that state, right? So what's happening here is really getting into that period of emotional absorption is an initial tapping into that really makes tapping into that so much easier. And sometimes it's simply hard because we're not familiar with those states or those experiences. And the good news is that you can enter into any state that you would like, because you are all imagination. And this is what's so amazing. Prove me now herewith, saith the Lord of hosts, if I will not open up the windows of heaven and pour you out a blessing, that there shall not be enough room to receive it. The windows of heaven will not and cannot be opened, and its treasures seized by a strong will, but they open of themselves and present their treasures as a free gift, a gift that comes when absorption reaches such a degree that it results in a feeling of complete acceptance. Now, this is, again, this is the amazing thing about all this. Your only obligation is to feel good. Your only obligation is to feel as though you already are who you want to be, and the windows of heaven, the treasures that you are seeking, that you have wanted, will present themselves to you. How's that for a deal? They will present themselves to you if you will simply be absorbed in the emotion of the state fulfilled, to such a degree that it results in a feeling of complete acceptance of, this is mine. It's mine. Absolutely. Of course it is. The passage from your present state to the feeling of your wish fulfilled is not across a gap, and there is a continuity between the so-called real and unreal. To cross from one state to the other, simply extend your feelers, trust your touch, and enter fully into the spirit of what you are doing. And this is where the magic is. Assume the spirit, the feeling of the wish fulfilled, and you will have opened the windows to receive the blessings. Assume the spirit. To assume a state is to get into the spirit of it. The Lord of hosts will not respond to your wish until you have assumed the feeling of already being what you want to be, for acceptance is the channel of his action. Acceptance is the Lord of hosts in action. And this is why Neville says, to the degree of naturalness that you carry around the thing desired, it will manifest accordingly, because acceptance is synonymous with naturalness. Real, full, total acceptance is synonymous with naturalness. And we create the naturalness, that state of acceptance, by entering into periods of total emotional absorption. So your only obligation here, again, is to go back to the feeling, 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 over and over and over again. Because at the end of the day, even when the thing you want shows up in physicality, you really still just wanted the feeling. And this is what is just absolutely amazing. You just wanted the feeling all along. You just wanted the feeling. So if you can simply enter into the feeling to such a degree that you are emotionally absorbed fully by that feeling, you'll find that the manifestation is sure, it is quick, it makes haste. Your obligation is to accept right now that you are who you want to be. And the only thing preventing you from experiencing the fruit of desired states in your life is your unwillingness to be totally and fully emotionally absorbed. So go forth and be absorbed by the feelings of success, by the feelings of wealth, by the feelings of joy, by the feelings of abundance, by the feelings of health, by the feelings of goodness. Go forth, and like a gatekeeper, do not permit those states that would succeed in destroying the kingdom that you have built. And you perform your gatekeeping duties by living in the wish fulfilled. It's all yours. You got it. It's already yours. Talk soon.